And here we go.
Folks in Egypt are accusing Netflix of misrepresenting history in Netflix's new docuseries called Queen Cleopatra.
Cleopatra was Greek. When you look up sculptures of Cleopatra, not looking like a black person to me. Even if you look up her siblings. Come on now. Homeboy ain't black. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, girl. Cleopatra was Greek. Putting black faces on white bodies is not representation.
Culturally, African Americans have no connection to ancient Egypt whatsoever.
Whatsoever. We're going to get into this in a minute and how this depiction of Cleopatra and the thoughts that it tries to evoke are literally an impossibility. But worse than that, now we finally got what's touted here as a pro-African reaction, but this is an Afrocentric and a well-known one. You'll probably recognize him whenever he comes on. But whenever I was a kid,
culturally African American,
Michael Jackson came out with a video called Remember the Time, and it was supposed to have been about remembering a girlfriend from, hey, you remember me, you remember me from back in school, hey, or something along that line. But it got changed into a, don't you remember the time that West Sub-Saharans were somehow in Egypt? And that's actually an impossibility. I'll show you a bit on that, but I'm going to react to this and show you a few things, and they're going to show you what makes them feel this way, and I'm going to elaborate on that and so on. Let's continue here.
Americans have no connection to ancient Egypt whatsoever. We're trying to find a sense of belonging in a culture we're not even a part of.
This is their idea of being inclusive.
The notion that Cleopatra was black is silly. I mean, again, you're allowed to do this in Hollywood because, of course, the only thing that matters is our weird, parochially American perception of what race matters. It's super, super strange.
What's wrong with Netflix showing Cleopatra as a black woman? Well, one, she wasn't. Her ancestor was the general of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian ruler.
Here's how it worked.
If I'm not mistaken, that's an Egyptian lady who came out and made her own video. And I'd like to mention that's just one somebody selected out of this, because there's a plethora of them coming out of people that are the Egyptians. And it might seem weird to you that knowing that Egypt got taken over by Macedonian Greeks and Alexander the Great, and then their generals took over, and to find out after that that they didn't even learn Egyptian. In fact, the first one that learned Egyptian out of all of the Ptolemies that they can find was this Cleopatra. But we all know about her because of the Romeo and Juliet type effect and the really scantily story that even in a modern day has to be kind of a few things kind of hush-hushed about and everything because of the sexual portion of it and so on, and how she used her womanly ways to try to save Egypt. But you see this weird thing like he's talked about in Hollywood also, where recently, very recently, there has been a plethora of movies where they seem to what they want to do, and shows that are on Netflix and so on, which is one of the worst perpetrators. In fact, where Cleopatra's on now too. So it's like you're developing quite a box full of bullshit over here, making yourself to be something other than just showing these movies. Whether it's kids twerking and things like that, or all the other shows where they seem to take somebody like Hannibal Barca out of North African heritage of Carthaginians and all that leads up to the Punic Wars, and turn around and go, well, he could have been black, so we're going to put this guy, and but most people don't realize that it's feeding the engine of people that are caught up in a cargo cult, and by having this incredible need to attach themselves to something, whenever they find out who they were, they're like, no, let me look around a little bit and make my own choices, it seems. And therefore we're left with a people that are literally lost by their own hands, and whenever you're trying to tell them no, you have to understand they've got a new magic word. That's racist because you didn't say we built the pyramids. I've literally seen that statement. Ben's a real intelligent person, and I would think that there are 1 million people probably right now that know as much about Greeks and Egypt and how this all happened at once, at one time, at the very end of the Egypt dynasties, and he's pretty well of how it all went down. I'm going to back it up here so I don't miss the first few words here.
Was the general of Alexander the Great, the Macedonian ruler.
Here's how it worked. After Alexander the Great conquered vast parts of North Africa and the Middle East, and then died, this would be in the 4th century BCE, there was a giant sort of conflict that broke out among his chief generals. Okay, there was the Seleucid Empire. That was one area. One of the empires was the Ptolemaic Empire, right? Ptolemy. Okay, Ptolemy was one of his regional governors, and he ended up taking over that area. He was Greek. All of his descendants were therefore from him. They were Greek.
She was Greek. She was Macedonian. We know this. How can you not know this?
So that person talking in the bottom left-hand corner there was ShakaAmose. He's an infamous Afrocentric, and he's all about the Egyptians were West Sub-Saharan somehow, and he keeps claiming we. There's a wide band in here with there's some of them going, okay, we weren't, we were West Sub-Saharans, but some black people somewhere did something. And then there's the weird effect where, because of the cargo cult mentality, and to them everybody is either black or white, and they pretty much disavow every other people on the planet. If you're darker than a sheet of paper, they claim. It's really an issue. I've got an actual video on it about cargo cults. It's done off of Robert Seffer's work and some people that went to islands in the South Pacific that just saw the white man during that time, and what their beliefs are and what they're still to this day doing in this belief. And it's not the same, but then again, you can find this and the mentality that goes along with it straight up. So she was pretty much the last ruling pharaoh of Egypt. It was falling apart, but a lot of people said it fell apart well before, and then once the 25th dynasty thing happened and so on, and then Persians came in and all this other stuff, which is what Alexander was the flop of going back the other way and recantering back out. By the way, Alexander was looked at as a savior to him. He was instantly crowned as a pharaoh. It was this big pomp and circumstance. You saved us. There's a lot of things about that too, but just let's keep on who's who, what's what, and who isn't who, and so on. Continue.
Netflix accurate in the depiction of Cleopatra being black?
She have curly hair like me and a similar skin color.
I remember my grandmother saying to me, I don't care what they tell you in school, Cleopatra was black.
So that's really odd that even in the premiere that they show, the little clip that they show to be like, check this out. I remember my grandma said, I don't care what they tell you, Cleopatra was black. We also saw somebody that's in Egypt, I'm guessing, or some Middle Eastern guy there just a few moments ago, and he said skin like me and pointed around at himself. But I think we can all understand that guy is a little mixed. And for some reason, this ends up getting people a little mixed up because they feel like they're playing ping pong with themselves. And then they start running through all these things that would make their fantasy true as opposed to a reality. Here's something that I have loaded up, but on a different tab right now, but because it's put back to back in this that shows the ShakaAmose reaction, I'm using it from there. But I have the same thing pulled up, and then some other pictures of him, and then some other pictures, and I'll make a contrast in his showing here because ShakaAmose comes on and he says he can prove the Egyptians were black in one picture, and he can't start even with trying to show one picture or say anything. He goes off with a series and pulls through an Afrocentric thing that's been well debunked for a long time, but we'll get there here in a minute. Listen to what this man says. This Bassem, he's a guy that used to be a doctor and now he's a comedian. Pretty cool looking guy. I want you to see if he's an Egyptian, a heritage going way back, and he's fixing to tell you about that situation. But I also want you to look at his eyes. See if you recognize anything. They seem to go with his shirt real well.
Not about white and black. This is a very reductive way to talk about things. This is the way that Americans talk about it. I'm very sorry. Like, I come from Egypt. Egypt has a very diverse color palette. People can look like me or they can look deeper skin tone like Anwar Sadat, who comes from a Nubian origin. It's not about black and white.
His argument is that Egyptian history is being erased and being appropriated by all these different groups. And he's saying he's not cool with it when it's white people doing it. He's not cool with it when it's black people doing it.
This representative's approach here is talking about not the color in particular, but like the misrepresentation of the history.
It's about the continued.
So black people are understanding somehow that there's being a misrepresentation of history. Of course, this Afrocentric look says, oh, because you're trying to keep us out of the deal. And it's like, you never had anything to do with it. I want to say that this man that's here, you can see his phenotype and things that go on here. I'm going to make a comparison with that and an ancient Egyptian here in just a moment that I said a long time ago, but I didn't remember the guy's name. Here we go.
Culture appropriation and falsification of history that has been done by what the so-called Afrocentrist movement.
They want to tell you it's Afrocentrics and African Americans that are making all of this up.
Cleopatra, Black and Beautiful by Dr. Sally Ann Ashton, PhD.
Now let's see who Dr. Sally Ann Richardson is very quick.
It's Sally Ann Ashton, not Sally Ann Richardson. It's like Ahhh can't hear quite correctly. This is a lady that's a known pusher of Afrocentric lies, and of course any Afrocentric will grab onto that. They'll say, there's a million things I could look at, but she said this thing that goes with my lie, so I'm going to tell you about this, as if nothing else exists. She's famously for showing combs and saying that they're not as thin-tined as we have today with modern plastics and so on, but thicker-tined used back then. And so that's more a little like an Afro pick, isn't it? And getting blacks misleading. And they're like, yeah, see? And what's odd about that is you take Afro picks back and it doesn't go. But then also somebody famous here in the debunking realm took a whole bunch of pictures of combs from predating this and Egyptians all the way up to pretty close to a modern time, showing you, oh wait, these are exactly the same as the Egyptians. The only problem is these are combs in the Nordic people all across the Middle East, on this island here, on these other places, and so on. So why is Sally Ann Ashton doing this? Well, she's also known for going to prisons and speaking to black people and misleading them too. It makes you wonder who's paying this lady. And believe it or not, she is in the premiere opening thing that we were looking at a piece of, where the lady said that my grandma told me Cleopatra was black. Of course, back then, I'm willing to guess that her grandma wasn't a historian or an Egyptologist for sure, but that seems to trump anything. And if you find any knowledge, you're like, duh. Well, here we're showing a picture of what Cleopatra looked like. But then again, here we have Cleopatra, Black and Beautiful by Sally Ann Ashton, which is just pushing an Afrocentric viewpoint. So in this video, it's going to get a little swirly and caught up like a web a little bit, because I'm going to show you what people say and what a lot of people agree with, but then the reality of things, and then also an Afrocentric viewpoint that's going on here. So it's real important that they show you these things. But of course, even underlined in her book here in the statement, it says, the simple answer to both questions is to regard to Cleopatra is that we do not know whether she was beautiful and black or unattractive and white, or a combination of these modern concepts. What? So she calls herself unattractive and white, and notice how that's put together and everything, and the only way we can figure it out is through DNA. Well, DNA's been proving a lot of things here lately for us, hasn't it? My site's been kind of infiltrated with all of a sudden, well, here's what genetics says. Genetics steps up to the plate and cannot be denied, and it says, whoops. Of course, all of these things are what Afrocentrics are steering around while they keep talking about other things and bringing up lies and possibilities. So to show you the far reach of this idea of we as Cleopatra is going to be shown here on how she might have been partial something because of something, and then therefore if the Egyptians were West Sub-Saharan Bantu somehow, then still she'd be an admixed person. Well, the one that plays Cleopatra is I believe, a 50-50 admix, but then they act like that, like, well, her dad's black or her mother's white. But then you have to realize, well, her dad actually has a high percentage of Caucasian DNA from the Wayback Machine. We don't need to go there right now. We're just trying to get here.
Hey, yo, Ozzy, does she look like an Afrocentric to you? Because she's had her hand involved with all of this black Cleopatra stuff.
It's about the continuous culture appropriation and falsification of history that has been done by what the so-called Afrocentrist movement. The Afrocentric movement started the last century as a way, in a good intention, to teach African American about their rich history of West Africa, the great empire of Benin, of Ghana, of Songhali, the great empire of Mali. But the thing is, that's why you find people like Kevin Hart, who subscribes to these theories, who claim that his ancestors built the pyramids. I'm sorry.
We'll cut back in here, remember where we are. So now we have a couple of things flipping at us real quick and everything, but this ideal that Jayda Pinkett Smith, she's the one behind this, Will's wife, you know, the slap, the whole thing, goes out with her son's friend, something. Anyhow, in that, she decided to make a series about black queens to really help out black people. Of course, the first attempt on this that we've gotten here modernly was that Queen of Dahomey, the woman king idea, and how they misportrayed that and wanted to leave out that they were major slavers and human sacrifice and all kinds of things. And so that really was a debacle here. So someone guesstimated that, well, she was going to show one and then something else and then maybe da-da-da, but all of a sudden here it is, bam, second sub-Saharan. This is what they're trying to show, not any lies, of course, and talking about these are documentaries in some way that I'm sure somebody could pick apart each and every one that she attempts. But in this idea, the second one that she shows tries to turn around and say, there's a slight possibility, maybe, and no one agrees with this at all, that she might have been darker skin somehow, even though they had incest and kept it within the family and didn't even learn Egyptian language till Cleopatra herself. But somehow that might be a West Sub-Saharan Bantu, a people that didn't know Egypt existed. So here we have that cargo cult mentality where they're trying to, if you watch my video on cargo cult, it really kind of goes into it, and then you say, well, this is a variation of the theme, but I can see the same thing still happening to this day, and a feeling of owing. So you see what this guy looks at here, and his blue eyes and stuff like that. Rather good looking guy, wears nice suits, almost has a Miami Vice look today on him. But we're gonna look at something else here. Here he is from a few years ago, down the road and everything, showing you he's got a comic, that face is going wild and everything off of it. But I wanna give you a depiction here, something to look at. Let's just go with that, shall we? You see the man we're looking at, a phenotype. I don't want to go back and forth and so on. You see a slightly hooked nose and so on going on there, but if we were to just blot that feature of his face out and leave everything else there, you can see a phenotype that still exists in Egypt today. And it's not just the eye color. But now let's see if I can show you an ancient Egyptian, because in a minute, ShakaAmose is I can do it in one picture and then can't really do it in 9 pictures showing an Afrocentric slideshow that everybody's familiar with of darkened images and misleading things, which we'll get into. So I'm going to type in seated scribe. Because that's what this guy was known by for years. Can't get an exact representation, but here we go. This is a seated scribe from the dynasties leading right into the pyramids, before the Great Pyramids. Indeed, his son, our grandson, might have been Himwenu, because things weren't kept just so great about scribes. But over time, they've been able to track it down by figuring out who this one is and that one is, and there are inscriptions around it. But there used to be a pedestal around his bottom that didn't come with him whenever they got him. You can see those crystal blue eyes that looks a lot like Bassem. In fact, I'd like to say, yeah, they look a lot alike, don't they? Well, the nose is not quite as hooked. But I think in all these situations, we can look at this and tell it's the same type of phenotype. Yeah. So there's somebody that looks kind of like an ancient Egyptian, which is a far cry from anybody else. But he's not alone, and I can show you so many more than just his pictures that are shown here. There are a lot of other scribes that have blue eyes on them. In fact, there's like 28 statues or something like that that have them, and it leads all the way through until it peters out at about the 8th dynasty, and then there's one other person that has it at the 12th dynasty if they have the correct statue on it, on Ahhh's statue. And then Nefertiti still has one blue eye left in her famous statuette. In her right eye, when we're looking at it, it's on the left. The other one's missing. But some people have said that might even be a remnant from one of these and somebody stole it from her, so on, or there's extras. Anyhow, So I think that ruins the whole idea, and DNA has come out and said there's a continuity from way back when all the way through. There's no, and in fact what they were trying to do was see, well, whenever things happened and they had little deals, did the genetics change at all? And they're like, no, it didn't even change all the way through in the post-Roman times. And then what changes it? Well, they get some slavery in there from admixing people and some Arabs and so on that went on after that, but we're talking about the Egyptians. It didn't really happen. Who were they? You're looking at them. I don't know how much of a chance there is that Yousef here is actually a Coptic. But from what I've learned, I would believe he is. And now I'd like for you to look at Bassem. I don't have the guys quite caught over here on the left, but if the ancient Egyptian scribes, who are derived from nobility, by the way, passed down, people that weren't going to be kings, princes, and so on, they all got taught the cuneiform, all that type of stuff. It's well known. Whether they kind of look like Bassem here, or they in any way would look like West Sub-Saharans over here on the far left, and of course no one could say it's not. Look at him whenever he talks and listen to him though about this cultural theft, and second half of this I didn't even get it over in on, but I'm about to.
Continuous culture appropriation and falsification of history that has been done by what the so-called Afrocentric movement. The Afrocentric movement started the last century as a way, in a good intention, to teach African American about their rich history of West Africa, the great empire of Benin, of Ghana, of Songhali, the great empire of Mali. But the thing is, that's why you find people like Kevin Hart, who subscribes to these theories, who claim that his ancestors built the pyramids. I'm sorry, your ancestors had their own wonderful civilization in West Africa. They are.
And I don't know if you know it or not, but Kevin Hart, the famous comedian that's been in all these movies, you know, it's almost like a Will Smith thing. Oh man, look like we've got a double twofer going on with his wife and a slap. But Kevin Hart, the comedian, a shorter guy. Anyhow, he came out and started talking crap about how blacks used to be the ancient Egyptians. I would have never thought it. But lo and behold, he's trapped up in this cargo cult concept too, so you can see it's running rampant through a people that didn't even know Egypt existed. But he was having a concert in Cairo and stuff, and they canceled on him. They went, no, here's all your stuff back. No, don't even come here. If you've got some kind of stupid lie you're going to try to tell. Yeah, it's terribly disgusting, but he's trying to tell you about cultural appropriation, and blacks, of course, just sit and smile through this, wearing Caucasian clothes, and everything around them's Caucasian too, so you can see that there's this incredible thing that's upon them called reality, and instead of having any reality to themselves, they start embracing well-known Caucasian civilizations that, hey, something you may not have known, but just like Bassem, who has still blue eyes here in the culture, that some of that still exists in Egypt today. Well, was it rampant before? Oh yes, I can actually spend time showing you all that, but we're gonna go on through this because I can't wait to get to the Afrocentric reaction and the attempts. Let's go.
Culture appropriating my culture, calling the people of Egypt of today, despite their skin tone, that they call us as invaders, they call us as intruders, and they are being erased from our own history. This is something that Hollywood has done over the years.
The simple answer to both questions with regard to Cleopatra is that we do not know whether she was beautiful and black, unattractive and white, or a combination of any of those modern concepts.
Strange how she words it that way too. You can tell this is pushing a straight Afrocentric loon idea, and she's been called on a bunch of times, And so you'd say, well, we can't use her because they know. But instead they're like, see, and it's like, yeah, well, let's look what she says versus reality. See, oh, she said something about combs. See, here's combs. Find me a sub-Saharan comb. Oh, wait, you're having a problem attaching yourself somehow, and she's just feeding your engine of the wrong thing. And once y'all finally realize that, maybe you'll make it stop. Or this current modern day pandering where apparently everybody in mythology, all of a sudden they've got to interject a black person someplace where they never were. It's becoming quickly renamed the Age of Pandering because of this type of behavior. Whether it's Little Mermaid or any number of god-awful things. But so here's black people talking about it. Oh man, I probably ought to kick it over here just a little bit, because down there in the bottom is ShakaAmose. He quite often wears a little side lock of the Egyptians. He's got videos where he's trying to sing and says that we're the ones, we're not West Sub-Saharans, we was people that look like white people. What are you talking about? Genetics has stepped up to the plate, by the way, enough times to where it's not even in question. In fact, they even put papers out that go, no, it's like this and a continuity. And they're like, oh, that's just whitey science and shit. It's terribly disgusting. Let's continue.
We do not have the body to indicate her race through testing DNA. It is with Cleopatra's grandfather that uncertainties develop. Although he had 2 wives of traditional Macedonian background, he seems to have had at least 1 concubine of uncertain origin.
Now, so here's the concept that maybe the concubine's daughter was Cleopatra and not the one that we know that it is because of what they said. Therefore, it could have been someone else. And with blacks' mentality, thinking, well, it's all black or white, they instantly throw the idea, well, could she have been a Bantu? Oh boy. And then they say, well, there's a possibility because that concubine might have been an Egyptian lady. Oh, you see, because we was Egyptians, now therefore she might have actually been black. So there's a double entendre thing going on here with the idea that she could even possibly have any ancestry. So hopefully what this does is this leaves us with an open dialogue on the idea of nope, and in fact, the people that keep trying to claim it, what was your history versus that? And you didn't even know Egypt existed, and the world didn't know you existed. If you get deep into that, you'll figure out something that they probably know also, it seems, and want to steer desperately away from that and go with we were someone else than ourselves. It's right in your face, the idea that they just can't stand it. So this idea of he might have had a concubine and the kid might have come to that, and see, that might have been Cleopatra's grandmother. So at best there might have been a quarter of an Egyptian in there. And so we're going to show you this Bantu girl. You can't make it equate any way in your mind whatsoever, but believe me, they find a way that they do. Let's continue with what's said here in this couple of paragraphs that's in a book by an Afrocentric lady trying to act ambiguous and lie, and black people are like, oh boy.
May have been Cleopatra's grandmother, but this is by no means clear, and some sources indicate she was her husband's sister, and thus pure Macedonian.
Oh my God. You had to legally put it in there or something, because lo and behold, but this is by no means clear, and some sources indicate that she was her husband's sister. What? Yeah, they know this actually to be somewhat a fact, an agreed upon fact on these people who actually know, not just making up bullshit, that there's some, well, slightly distant, not direct incest right here. Okay, well, they do it again one other time too with an incest thing to keep from being in any way bred with the Egyptians or anybody else. They don't even learn the language until Cleopatra. So this says, why do you think there's such a chance of a maybe or whatever? And if it was a quarter or whatever, if it was a quarter of Egyptians and we look at that, you probably couldn't discern it because they're extremely similar people and they're of course not black. Before this, but way back when they were black. I just showed you somebody who was in the starting of pyramid building. I can go to pre-dynastic Ghibelline mummies and show you Ginger, the blonde-haired pre-dynastic Ghibelline mummy. Can you show me a Bantu anywhere? No, you can't. You're going to try to claim Nubians. You're trying to claim Horners all the time, or Ethiopians as we call them today, but it's really the area of Abyssinia that got renamed, and now that's got them going on with that idea too. But they're not related to and didn't know those people existed either. It was hilarious. We were on Chief X's channel one time and there's a guy on there from the Horn of Africa, and that guy, Misinformation Man, who just tried to say that Buddha was black because he's got snails on his head, and asked Chief X, well then who can we claim? Was claiming that, and the guy told him straight out, y'all need to quit trying to claim that you were us instead of yourselves. And he just plays it off like, oh, okay, well, and let's go on to something else, and let's talk, ooh. And of course I come on there in a few minutes, and as soon as I do, he just starts to yell and try to talk over me for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then whenever I make a noise, he does it again and again, and he claims he's a god, and all this crazy stuff. Oh, I can't hear you, I can't hear you, I can't hear you from 4th grade. Yeah, it was right there. And he calls himself Mr. Information Man or something. We said, no, it's kind of, he drank a Bug Light, now it's Misinformation Man, because that goes well with the fact that, A, what he's about, but then also he gives misinformation. Assuming, however, that Cleopatra's grandmother was not from the traditional Macedonian Greek stem, the question arises as to just what she was. So everybody, let's roll a 20-sided dice, and if we get a 1, that means that she was a Bantu that walked in there not speaking English or any language that they would have understood, and next thing you know, this guy got enamored with her and da-da-da, and it would have been her grandmother. No, well then why are you showing her as a no, it doesn't work. Would it have worked if they took a Nubian or Nilotic? Oh no, definitely. Listen, just to be straightforward, if you were saying that they sheltered themselves from even possibility of Egyptian, the Egyptians distasteful towards the Nubians, and they weren't allowed in Egypt by decrees and all this other stuff, what makes you think that one was lollygagging around anyhow and then she became a princess? What kind of foolish fantasy do you got going on in your mind? Let's continue.
Assuming, however, that Cleopatra's grandmother was not from the traditional Macedonian Greek stem, the question arises as to just what she was. Sources suggest that if she was not Macedonian, she was probably Egyptian. So by the time of Cleopatra's grandparents, there may have been an Egyptian element in the racial stem.
See, the Ptolemaic dynasty was Macedonian Greek. Cleopatra's parents committed incest. They were both members of the same dynasty and were extremely closely related.
The stories that white people, young...
Here we go. The stories of white people and young. What's he gonna try to pull?
Ignorant white people like to tell is that she was just Macedonian and the Macedonian line were incestuous, and so therefore there was no out. It's bullshit.
And the Macedonian.
Really? Well, what does the Egyptians say about it? Now, again, this has got to be embarrassing for them in some way because it's not them that were controlling it. They were controlled by another people, but they know damn well who it was. And there are people here who somewhat are confused and saying different things. And what are they? They're ignorant white people. But what's she saying here? Macedonians who ruled Egypt, we all know it, but what?
Macedonians who ruled in Egypt were famously worried about mixing with Egyptians. They didn't even learn Egyptian until Cleopatra.
The native Egyptians had a long history of intermarriage with the Ptolemies. That means that the Ptolemies were not fully Macedonian and fully Greek.
Did you just hear him? I may want to get it pulled back here. So, reality says they even caused incest and sheltered themselves from even being in with an Egyptian. But ShakaAmose wants to tell you that the reality is they have a long history of breeding with Egyptians. Okay, well, blue-eyed people, similar genetics, may or may not flare up or show or anything, but you see, he's got this delusion that we were the ones in a Michael Jackson video dream, and therefore she might have been West Sub-Saharan Bantu somehow. You see that giant leapfrog of stupid there? Here we go.
They were mixed.
So the thing is that we are the only people who are not allowed to tell our own. We are the only people who are not allowed to talk about our own history.
All right, let me bring. All right, let me.
Okay. What's weird is the guy that was on the far right that really is cut out of view in the last shot there with Bassem talking and trying to talk over him. Sounds familiar. Started making these weird faces, and everybody in the comments of the video are making, telling him he looked like he turned into a woman there for a few minutes and started making these exaggerated faces and everything. It's crazy. It's hilarious. But yeah, so somehow the Egyptians, now this is not true, but it's getting to where people are trying to act like this. Is what he's saying is the Egyptians can't talk about themselves anymore. They got all these other people telling you about it. Well, one of the people that's telling you about it are geneticists who are world-renowned. They could tell you about anything, about any human anywhere around. So what if they're talking about Egypt and they're in Germany in the University of Tübingen or whatever off of it? Do you have your genetics lab that's world-renowned and everything? Do you want to do that knowing that what you've seen so far shows you that you don't have a connection as well as even Europeans and ancient Anatolians did to the ancient Egyptians? You'd be blowing billions of dollars of that tourist money that you get from it to make a genetics lab to prove that you're not really the ones, and who are the people that used to run and rule Egypt and so on. So what do we got going here?
I showed you content from Oxford University Press speaking about the ambiguity of her paternal ancestry, her maternal ancestry, and the general ancestry of the Ptolemies.
The paternal and the male ancestry, the Ptolemies? You want to act like that's the, I mean, we've got sculptures of them, everything. You want to act like that? He showed you something. So here they go. And blacks will buy into this real quick, like eating a cookie. And the next thing you know, they're like, well, could they have been Bantu that didn't know Egypt existed and are across a Sahara Desert bigger than the United States that's impassable? Pretty much until camels came along. Oh wait, there were a people of North African Caucasian ancestry that made it down there about 4400 BC and caused an admix that before that point, they were a still small-brained hominid, like Iwualiru. Oh my God, we don't want to go there. Let's just try to stay with Cleopatra here off of it, but what I'm saying is true. You can wiki it. Wiki Asalar, man, and it'll tell you the oldest Negroid of the current phenotype is this. Then it says, well, they have these other names, like Iwualiru and so on. Click on that and then look at it, and you're looking at a 4.5 foot tall, football-headed, small-brained hominid. So he proved to you by this one thing from Oxford Press, and it doesn't say what he says it says, but he says the paternal and maternal ancestry, and nobody knows. Okay, wow, okay, let's go back to nobody knows. And one thing that we all know right now for sure, it couldn't have been a Bantu in any way, or anybody from that lineage. It's so self-exposing. It's terribly self-exposing to try to interject yourself in a place that you didn't even know existed. It's continual.
None of that said anything about being pure Greek or Macedonian. But all you will have is a litany of white people and Egyptians dying on the hill of her being Greek and Macedonian. So Cleopatra...
Now you have a bunch of black people dying on a hill that she could have been banned to try to interject themselves because we like the name Cleopatra, like that one lady's grandmother. Which, how much bearing should that have on anything? Look, if you're a racist, low IQ liar that doesn't even know about anything, how much weight should there be for this? Well, really none, but we need to have an open conversation so this type of thing quits happening. So I guess what we need to do is have a... Pardon me. Have a big town hall kind of thing, something that's well televised and then reshown over again, or maybe during Black History Month or something like that, as opposed to a bunch of lies that get shown during that same time like it's our holiday of lies. Let's continue here with what ShakaAmose here in the bottom left is trying to deceive these other people with.
His mother may have been Egyptian.
But now we have to prove whether or not Egyptians were the true blacks.
That's easy to prove. That's not a whole night lecture. That's like one picture proves that. Literally, one picture proves that.
Literally, one picture proves that. Okay, I gave you one picture earlier that looks a lot like Bassem. And he's got blue eyes, and it comes from there, but I made other mentions. And if he's gonna show 9, I could show 9 too. I'll tell you something after he tries to show his blackwashed pictures. Something that years ago even was a hilarious thing called Negro Shop. Like Photoshop, but when black people use it for some reason to try to deceive people. Let's continue.
Let me see it. I gotta see it.
I'm about to show you white people. I want you to tell me how white they look. Hold on 1 second. Do you see these white people? They look white to you, Ozzy? Led Jehuti Yefang, Queen T. I'm in Hotep III. This is Queen T and her grandson, Tut. Amen, King Tut.
Yeah, so he couldn't show one, but he already had these little slideshow things that he puts out, and he tells people and goes, look at this, look at this. That picture of Queen Ty right there is about as dark and as contrast pitched picture of that I've ever seen. It was originally made out of yew wood, and yew wood is as light as pine, like when you get your fence. And then just like you get your fence, and over years it darkens a lot. It darkens a whole lot. You can look this up. Look up luthiers or somebody that uses yew wood, which is the ancient elven special wood, and the word they make bows out of too, by the way. But now, so there had to be quite a tree cut down to make this happen, but they claim that that's got an afro on it there too, by the way. And blacks are just sold on that idea. But in reality, she's wearing a headdress under that, and you can see the front of it there on her forehead. And that's just a silver veil cowling. Pretty damn cool. Hanging over her head. And it's a silver fishnet cowling that's around over her head. And then there's a little turquoise blue lapis lazuli rivulets put over it all over the place, but you can only still see they're attached in a couple of places. Yeah, and she has nothing to do with black. In fact, you've got other pictures of Queen Ty, and they keep showing this same one, like, oh, see me, look at me, get deceived. And you go, okay, well, Queen Ty, well, what are these other pictures? Hey, in this picture, she's got white people hair, and she's kind of a light mummy. They didn't even totally, what are you trying to do? Well, they figured it all out with genetics now too, and G2, and I don't want to have to go to the thing to show you genetics of G2 and where it is, and R1b, which is what King Tut and Akhenaten are, and his forebears from on there. Well, Tut, it dies at that point, and so we have an end of a dynasty, and they wanted it to happen that way too because of what Akhenaten did. But the guy on the right's an Egyptian that's from there right now, and they're trying to say, see, they're invaders. No, let me get something straight with you. One thing blacks will never show is the pale women, because Queen Tai is drawn as a real pale woman over here on it. And even other people have turned around and said, well, they weren't black, but they weren't white and all this other stuff. Well, let me ask you a question. If she has the capability of being this pale, then what are we talking about? Well, what about the dark males? Look, Caucasians tan quite readily, and I would think in Egypt it would happen running around wearing nothing but shorts and flip-flops. Sandals, basically. Wouldn't you think so? Being on ships all day, things like that. Because there are other males that are shown real light there, and it tries to confuse other people too, and it's like, well, the priests don't go out in the sun. It's one way to designate a priest, plus they're always shaven and shit. Yeah, so it's hilariously sad, but once you look into it and you find out that everybody, including the Greeks, all the way around the Mediterranean and Middle East, used to draw, and still to this day it's happened somewhat, and in artistic pieces through the Renaissance, and you can still see it where there are darker males and paler females. But at this time it's only 6 colors going on, and there's red ochre males and yellow ochre females, or pale females, and they went to trouble making that light color just about right. It's not yellow, it's kind of pink. How does that happen? Well, it's found in the Etruscans and the Minoans and Sumerians and Persia and even the Greeks. And no one's confused about any of these people, including the Caucasian Egyptians, except for this one people that didn't even know Egypt existed. They seem to keep claiming we was somehow them. Now, the guy asked, well, show me how they're black. And he goes, I can do it in one picture. And then it proceeds to show 9. I don't know if he can count or not. But then, what would Bantu have to do with this? Well, then they'd be able to believe that it wasn't just white people that heralded civilization, that somehow they were involved. And it's like, no, look, no matter what, in this whole little thing here, you wouldn't have been the people that would have been involved, sorry. And so, your history has nothing to do with it whatsoever. In fact, even the people that were not allowed in Egypt by decrees and so on, you're not related to, or the Horners or anybody else. And you need to quit this cultural appropriation on other black people, as well as just anybody else you feel like you want to talk about other than yourselves. But I don't know. I only showed one picture. One picture is worth 1,000 words, and it's worth 1,000 hours of watching black videos of lies, trying to take darkened images. I can take every image he showed and show you, that same person in another image, and go, well, what about this? Or like, oh, your picture was this, right? Well, why does this picture look like this versus your little idea?
This is a modern Egyptian all the way on the right. Does this look like they're descended over here? Here's the crazy part. If you go to Egypt today, it's there right now on the walls.
It's not just Cleopatra. Everybody in that movie, her court.
It's right there on the walls. Nubians aren't allowed ever into Egypt. But what are they? Oh, they're people just like the Middle Easterners are. In fact, genetics stacked up to the plate and goes, not quite exactly, more exactly like the ancient people of Anatolia, which in Herodotus, he said the Colchians were and everything. And then that had black people saying, oh, we were the people of Golden Fleece. And then he goes, no, it doesn't work that way. Please stop. But ancient Anatolia, but in these papers that they have, the one thing that keeps getting repeated is modern Europeans and ancient Anatolians. Oh, that's a Eurocentric view and everything. I'm showing you the truth of the fact of what genetics and everybody's always said. And I come to find out in research that we were saying this all the way up to World War II, and then everybody quit, and the swastika thing and da-da-da, and then all of a sudden we're being told, ambiguous, I'm not sure. And of course, blacks end up with this cargo cult idea, trying to claim anything but themselves, and it ends up pegging that. I'm Irish, and I'm not trying to say the Irish were in Egypt. I'm saying people with common genetics were here, because I don't find it, oh, they were in Egypt, they were in Ireland. No, in fact, we find it in quite a few different places. And what happened during all of this? So here we are again, and then I don't know if the guy on the right is going to make faces during this part of it, but the part of the video that I had pulled up, the guy starts making faces like he's smelling cat turds. I don't know what's going on.
Everybody who's supposed to be Egyptian, they look like they came from West Africa, from the south of the Sahara. We, as Egyptians, are being called intruders and invaders in our own culture. This has been going on systematically. I don't want to wake up one day and find a museum of the African American culture and history claiming the stolen Egyptian artifacts in the British Museum to be theirs. And now I'm hearing that Zendaya, the very popular actor, who I would love her to play it, but Zendaya ethnically is half Nigerian, half German, and now she's going to play. Where are the Egyptian actors? Where are the Arab actors who suppose it? And the thing is, even like historically wise, you see in the trailer, it's like, I don't care what they told you, but Cleopatra was black. Who's that woman?
That woman is somebody's racist, low IQ grandma who, if you'll just probably think to yourself, had no clue but really liked the idea of Cleopatra, and she heard something, and then she heard Africa, and she tried to put 2 and 2 together and come up with 7. And you believed it? Did you look into it at all? Well, you see, there's this belief by Africans in their cargo cult that that's just white people trying to whitewash everything and say that these were Caucasians whenever they weren't. And it's like, no matter what you go with, they're Caucasians. And no matter what you go with, Bantu didn't know Egypt existed. So don't act like, well, let's weigh this on a scale. In fact, what we're weighing on a scale is how pathetic this is, and it is sunk to the bottom. But also in that process, they decided to start putting out shows about it, and I hope this ends up coming out so we can have a good open conversation of who is who and where was where, so all this silly shit can end, and all the jealous lies, because it drives black people to do certain things and act in certain ways that really is not condoned, even by part of their own part. And believe me, I'm not saying all black people, because I should even show you in the first of the video here, there's 4 or 5 black people that are texting about it. They're like, no, dude, she was Greek. No, she was Greek. What are you doing here? What are you trying to do? Well, she might have been part Egyptian, and then see, it's a double whammy. No, you didn't have anything to do with, wow, so you're double self-exposing. That's hilarious. Why don't you make a show about the Bible and try to interject yourself? See how that goes.
Why is African American people are telling my own history? There's all of these pseudoscience and pseudo history has been going on.
There's the face and the effeminate on the right hand side. So he's telling you this pseudo history's been going on for a while.
And it has implications. No, I'm sorry. African people from West Africa did not build the pyramids.
Okay.
Cleopatra did not like that. And also Jewish people do not build the pyramids.
Okay.
It is time for Hollywood to listen to the people who own that history. So
well, you've made that.
So amazingly, all kinds of things are coming out. Oh yeah, there was never anything like that. The Bible's telling an untruth about that. It's twisting something backwards. In my studies, the only thing I could find closely related to it are the Hyksos that came in, and it's almost the same period of time that they try to talk about, but it's separated by a few hundred years of time. And so like, whoopsie here, no, but, and instead of actually saying that they were the slaves, and then this happened, and they went out the Red Sea, and and the big magic happened, what actually is that they left and went into more of the Levant area, which was still controlled by Egypt at the time. So you left and ran around for 40 years and ended up in Egyptian territory. How does this work out for anybody to, oh, whoopsie. But yet, lo and behold, they ruled Egypt for a while and then backed out. And then the story is they're the victim. But we're too busy talking about other people that are always the victim anyhow off of it. And let's continue.
One more thing. One more thing. Egypt had 30 dynasty over 2,700 years. We had kings and queens from the kingdom of Kush, from Nubia, from Libya. This area had bled into each other and
not really bled into each other. If you look into it, I'm sure he probably knows his own history better than he's portraying now, because if you look up viceroys of Kush, it'll tell you who was ruling over the people at the time and trying to domesticate them and all this stuff. And if you look at things that were said about Nubians and so on, you'll get a totally different picture than we were hanging around with flowers and kumbaya and all had a Woodstock festival, because it wasn't like that in any way, shape, or form. It goes on, and what came out of it wasn't. In fact, they'll tell you that those people that were from Egypt that were ruling over that might have admixed some off in there, and they believe those people that were like concubine princes were probably the ones that took over and everything. But not to feel sad about it whenever you're a West African Bantu. It's not you, you're not related or anything or whatever. Oh, it's black people in oppression. Oh yeah, you just can't seem to get off of that idea as we're propping you up. In an age of space, man, we're still dickering around about something that's been well established a long time ago, and it's not going to change. Oops.
expanded and shrunk into each other. I understand exactly what I mean when I say nationality or heritage or ethnicity.
Their identity is an imagined identity. That's why they're up in arms and why they're freaking out. Look, how long has black people's identity been under assault? You see us freaking out?
Black people's identity been under assault. We've been trying to show you who you are and the people that still exist there, and you don't like that. Now we've spent billions of dollars to westernize it in the colonized areas. Now you've tried to pull off this thing, colonizer, but the people over there are like, yes, more roads. We like the white world, the thing that we never had from forever, ever. I don't even know what Egypt is. What are you talking about? Whenever you go back to Ghana and places like that, sadly, a bunch of black people go over and they go, oh yeah, go to Egypt, the motherland. And it's like, what are you talking about? ShakaAmose is all tattooed up and stuff, got this crap going on. Now he's about to make a statement that is real self-exposing. Imagine this just flipped as he says it. I thought I'd say it beforehand here, but I was going to wait and then go, aha, after. Let's just say before. Imagine he tries to say why Caucasians are trying to claim Egypt, and then he exposes himself.
Becoming all undone. They disrespect us every day, in every way. Movies, film, you name it. Print, you name it. Blackface, you name it. The first major Hollywood film, what was that? Birth of a Nation? Everybody was in blackface. If black people are so wrong, why are these Egyptians freaking out? Why are they losing it and becoming undone? You
catch it again right as he goes into the statement. Why have blacks been coming up with all these lies? Why have they been coming undone? Why are they, who's pushing this? And who wants to believe it desperately? And wow, I know for a fact there's a lot of black people that are like, oh, and they're just so over it and realize, they're truly woke, if you will, that realize, oh no, we're looking like a clown on the world stage. Just like Chief X says, you're all this bullshit, you're just looking like a clown. Oh, we were this, we were that, you're just looking like a clown. But imagine this next statement that's about to come here flipped.
You know why? Because that imagined, manufactured, fake identity that they have is all they have. They don't have nothing else. Fake identity that they have is all they have. You know why? because that imagined, manufactured, fake identity that they have is all they have. They don't have nothing else. Everything that they got was given to them from the outside or taken by them from the inside. Everything.
It's weird how self-exposing that when he tries to go, wee, and then you go, okay, say a sentence and make me feel it. And they go, I'm going to self-expose and say, I'm projecting right now. I'm projecting incredibly. Without that, we ain't got nothing. Without that, you ain't got nothing. You know about the other sub-Saharan history. Oh, you don't want it. It's minimal. Nobody's building pyramids and civilization. You're just tens of thousands, if not more, years behind. If you look into the SLR, man, you never really evolved out of a Homo erectus type form. And it's funny that about the time that came out, people had came out with a deal said Homo erectus died off 100-something thousand years ago because of just being lazy. They were right near some real good rocks for flint and everything, and they were taking these crap rocks and busting them up, trying to make one-sided blade, not bifacial blade technology, all this other stuff. Don't want to get into it. And then all of a sudden they come out and they go, well, you know what? Homo erectus forms lived on all the way through the last ice age. And I guess a lot of people hearing this would be like, what? Look into the idea of Liru and Asillar, man, and they'll explain you what archaeology, all of archaeology, genetics, everything shows you, versus the idea that they're trying to pull. Of course, it's really just kind of opposite, just like all the time, it's just like opposite, because we were the first ones, we were this, we were that. Well, if you're looking at Homo erectus, yes, but you don't want to look at that. Steering desperately away from it, and then you try to disrespect your own history and say, without Egypt, we ain't got nothing. When you hear the word African, everybody goes, okay, so you're talking about black people. No, that's not true. Africa was named after and by endemic Caucasians. Sub-Saharan African. Do we have to be that concise about it and really, should we start calling it that? Should we quit calling Orientals Asians and Asian food whenever it's Oriental and not Asian? But they're in Asia now, kinda encroached, if you will. Oh, there's a lot of things I could go into about it, but imagine how self-exposing that statement is and how they feel like they have nothing if they can't live a lie. Prove to me with one picture. I can't count, here's 9. One of them's a cartoon.
And that includes Islam. But they're not true Egyptians, because if they were true Egyptians, the real people, actually, they are true Egyptians. They're not the people.
If they are the true, well, they are the true Egyptians, but how did it go? But if it ain't them, it was West Sub-Saharan Bantu somehow. What?
People of Kemet. The people of Kemet were not Egyptians. That's...
I should have let that roll instead of laughing. That's the part where blacks think that now if they know the non-Greekified Egypt word, where it shows you Egyptus was a brother of the Greeks, what? From before they started in Athena and connections. Oh, blacks heard about that and they made a book called Black Athena, trying to say, well, she was black. Interjecting with that little idea. Yeah. And so it's something that's been going on for generations, and then blacks feel like they have an identity crisis, an inferiority complex, and so to try to bandage that up a little bit, they've been telling everybody that they started their civilization for them and taught them how to bathe and did all this other stuff. You could literally go and see what I'm saying and look it up. Most people steer away from it. They're like, I don't want to. Well, sometimes you ought to learn what's going on around you and the way the people are acting. And the reason they look at you funny sometimes when you go shopping and you're like, oh, that one must be one of those ones that thinks he knew Egypt existed.
Egyptians. They're not the people of Kemet. The people of Kemet were not Egyptians. That's the mind fuck. That's the mind game. The people of Tashemu, the people of Upper Kemet. That's where that.
So then he tries to say a few words. In a minute, he's going to say that he has to be true to Ma'at and other things that he's culturally appropriating and trying to act like he did something. And you know, black people desperately wanting something like this can be so gullible sometimes, and so you see a lot of it. I would like to still again mention that you see a lot of black people coming out of the fog right now and going, oh my God, we look like a clown, shh, quit. But you don't see them trying to get them to quit really, because then reality hits, and that's too embarrassing, so they can't even critique their own people, and of course no one can critique anybody. You can't tell me nothing. And so we have this mentality, and they're just lost, just wasting time, just ruining themselves, racist, getting all bent out of shape. Meanwhile, Caucasians are propping them up more than any other person has been in humanity. You can actually see it in the age of pandering on a daily basis, and with perks and extra and a plus next to it. No respect, though, for themselves or the people who've done everything.
That culture came from. And they got it from the people in the Sudan. And it was a complex of Saharan and Sudanese mix.
So the Sudanese weren't vile troglodytes and then domesticated by them and then ruled over Kush later and all these other things that we all know. It was the Sudanese that were just so much more advanced. Okay, that's great. That's great. What about West Sub-Saharans? Oh man, you fall in a pile of poop in a dung hut. Please quit. You're not related even to those people, but you keep trying to claim that some black people did something somewhere. But see, there's that big juxtaposition there, because then all of a sudden they say we, because the world's only black and white. And you go, what about Asians? And then they try to claim they created agents.
That's what you see in Egypt.
Do you guys agree with this guy right here, or do you agree with the other gentleman?
So let me know down in the comments if you agree with what I'm saying. If there's something that I said that you don't agree with, or you can show me is not in effect. Did I trump anything that he could possibly put out with one photo? Do you realize that I could show you hundreds or thousands, but he could actually show you none that have any reality behind it? And again, that would be some black person somewhere that West Sub-Saharans aren't related to and didn't even know existed, leaving them with the same history that they've always had, and it does nothing for them. It's a zilch. It's a zilch. But they're hopping up down mad, and they feel compelled to act like this, to go around claiming and doing other things. And that Ahhh guy is a joke of the Afrocentric community. If you find anybody that are believing in him, they're desperate and so far down the river, they're not coming back, probably, sadly. Hey, let me know if you think. I'll put it down in the comments, and you can just put up on it if you want to, or say something. Bassem, does he kind of look like Paranefer, the seated scribe that they have named now? From between the 3rd and 4th dynasties during the pyramids? What do you think? Which one? A plethora of people on the left? Or this guy over here on the right? Or is it possible he may not have been quite as ethnic as the current population is now, and a third reality forms? Peace.